right, it's a little bit past time to get started, so we'll go ahead and do that. Morning. And before we get started, I asked Bill Clemens if he would to lead us in a prayer. Thank you, Bill. So I was thinking about a song that we could sing, and the lesson today is going to be on decisions, isn't it? So I was thinking, 272. Number 272, I've decided to follow Jesus. Obviously, that's the best decision we can make. But I'd like to go ahead and sing all three verses of that before we get started on our lesson. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Though none go with me, I still will follow. Though none go with me, I still will follow. Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back. My cross I'll carry till I see Jesus. My cross I'll carry till I see Jesus. My cross I'll carry till I see Jesus. No turning back, I'll follow him. All right, so today we're in lesson 4 of our book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles, chapter 4 on page 35. So when I was thinking about that, the decisions that we have here with King Rehoboam, I was thinking that we have decisions all the time, don't we? And my question, let's do a show of hands. I know Mel sometimes says, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, I'm going to. How many of you have ever asked somebody else for advice? Anybody? Yeah. So who'd you ask? Did you ask family members? Did you ask, your parents, your boss at work, friends, other co-workers? Depending on the situation, we ask a lot of people different things, don't we? And sometimes you ask older people that have been through those situations. Sometimes you ask your peers. Sometimes you ask your little kids, what do you want to do? So I was thinking about that. We have a lot of decisions that we make all the time. And even the president has advisors, doesn't he? You know, a lot of times, two heads are better than one, aren't they? You know, you get some extra opinions, you get to the thought process and things like that. You see it in TV shows. As a matter of fact, I was watching Little House on the Prairie yesterday. And it was kind of funny because it was a decision that Laura liked a kid named Jason. I don't know if y'all remember the show or not. But she was talking to Albert, her brother, and said, I really like Jason, but I don't know what to do. And what he did, he gave her some advice. He said, whatever you do, play hard to get. Don't tell him that you like him. He's going to like you. Don't do that. Whatever you do, don't tell him that you like him. Well, at the same time, the little kid Jason was talking to his friend. I really like that girl, Laura, but I just don't know what to say. I don't know what. He said, well, take her to the dance. Tell her that you like her. You've got to do that. If you don't do that, it's not going to work out. And then, sure enough, here comes Laura down the street. He's like, well, here she comes. What are you going to do? So Laura walks up. First thing she says is, Jason, I like you. Do you like me? And he said, no. Well, then what happens? Laura storms off. She's all upset. The friend over there beside Jason that this was going on with said, what an idiot. You had your opportunity right now, and you blew it. And I just thought it's so funny because, sometimes we get advice that's not good. Sometimes we get advice that is good. Sometimes we heed that advice. Sometimes we don't. And of course, later on, I think they ended up both going to the dance together and everything else. So everything worked out all right. But, it's like I say, in our lives, every day of our lives, we need to think about decisions. And like I say, today in our lesson, we're going to see about that. Another thing that I was thinking about when it comes to asking opinions, my dad had an old 33 Chevrolet. And we always, grew up, tinkering on it, working on it, making a street rod. And I have the car now, and I actually got it running. It's been years since it's been running and everything, but I've been working on it the last few days. Hopefully I'll get to drive it up here again one day. I was thinking about what he used to say when you would ask people their opinion. What color should I paint the car? What kind of engine should I put in it? What type of wheels should I put on it? Should I do this or do that? And he always used to say, if you ask 10 people their opinion on what to do, you're going to probably get 11 answers. Because somebody's going to have 2 opinions on what the best way to do would be. And that's true in life. There's a lot of times that, you ask people their opinion, you're going to get a lot of different answers. And, which one is the one that you follow? Which one is the one that you go with? But in today's lesson, like I say, he got 2 decisions to make. He's got 2 groups of people that he's talked to that we're going to look in our lesson. You can do one or the other. 50-50 choice right here. We'll see if he blows it or not. So let's read in 2 Chronicles chapter 10, like I said, page 35. And I kind of was going to mention too, like these 2 choices are 180 degrees apart, aren't they? It's not like you're going this way or go this way. It's like either this way or that way. It's like completely opposite of each other. So starting in verse 1. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard it, he was in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, that Jeroboam returned from Egypt. They sent for him and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So he said to them, Come back to me after 3 days. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived, saying, How do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, If you are kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him who stood before him. And he said to them, What advice do you give? How should we answer the people who have spoken to me, saying, Lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, Thus you should speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, My little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the king had directed, saying, "Come back to me the third day." Then the king answered them roughly. King Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges." So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he had spoken by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Now when all Israel saw the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, "What share have we in David? We have no inheritance as the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David." So all Israel departed to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the city of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadaram, who was in charge of revenue, but the children of Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. Therefore King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste to flee Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And I was kind of looking at just kind of a general history, and I found something on a website called Steps of Faith, and it was talking about kind of the what led up to this event. I thought it was a pretty good summary just in a few pages. Okay, after you read the Old Testament, it's very clear the nation of Israel has had a historically difficult time. It's probably one of the most hotly contested pieces of land on earth. Though the Jewish people had periods of oneness, most of the time the nation was divided into two kingdoms, Judah and Israel. These two kingdoms didn't just divide land, it was also divided hearts and eventually culture. Evidence of this division continues to this day. The nation of Israel began with the patriarch Jacob, son of Isaac, and twin to Esau. God changed his name to Israel, which means one who struggles with God, in Genesis 32:28, after Jacob wrestled with an angel. Jacob eventually had 12 sons who later became the 12 tribes of Israel, most predominantly Judah and Benjamin. For hundreds of years, Israel was a unified nation up through the reign of King Saul as its first king. After Saul's death, God anointed David to be king, but Abner, Saul's cousin and general of the army, did not care for David. So he placed Saul's son, Ishbosheth, the man of shame, on the throne over the northern and eastern tribes of Israel, while David ruled the southern tribe of Judah, or Judea, with Jerusalem as its capital. Israel, now a smaller version of itself, became the northern kingdom with its capital in Samaria and contained every tribe but Judah. Ishbosheth reigned for 2 years until he was murdered by two of his own captains. David then reunited the nation, 2 Samuel 5, 6 through 7. And Israel prospered for many years under David and his son Solomon. But after Solomon's death in 930 BC, his son Rehoboam threatened to raise taxes on the northern tribes despite the northerners' efforts to keep the peace. And so the country split again. Rehoboam then became king of Judah in the south with the two tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and one of Solomon's servants named Jeroboam was chosen by God to lead Israel and the other 10 tribes, 2 Kings 11 and 12. And like I said, that was, I thought, just kind of a pretty good brief summary of what happened and where we are today with Rehoboam in our story and Jeroboam. So on our introduction on page 37, Scripture reports that David died in a good old age, full of days and riches and honor, and Solomon his son reigned in his place. And at the beginning of this time, God was happy with him and exalted him exceedingly. But when given the opportunity to ask for a special blessing from God, and I think we all know this from when we grew up in Bible class and stuff, God said he'll give Solomon any blessing he wanted. And instead of asking for riches and things such as that, what did he ask for? He asked for wisdom and knowledge to properly lead the nation. And this selfless petition pleased the Lord. And then we read in verses 11 and 12 that because this was in your heart, and you have not asked for riches or wealth or honor or the life of your enemies, nor have you asked for a long life, but have asked for wisdom and knowledge for yourself, that you may judge my people over whom I make you king. Wisdom and knowledge are granted to you, and I will give you the riches and wealth and honor, such as none of the kings have had who were before you, nor shall any after you have the like. So true to his word, the Lord blessed Solomon abundantly. And I thought it was interesting too, references 2 Chronicles 9, verses 22 and 23, that people came to Solomon from over the lands, but it doesn't. I don't think it really does it justice as far as how wealthy King Solomon was. So I want to read 2 Chronicles 9. This is a chapter before we get into our lesson today, verses 13 through 28. And this just kind of gives you an idea of the vast wealth and everything of Solomon. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold, besides that which the explorers and merchants brought. And all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the land brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went into each shield. And he made 300 shields of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went into each shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. The king also made a great ivory throne and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps and a footstool of gold, which were attached to the throne. And on each side of the seat were armrests and 2 lions standing beside the armrest, while 12 lions stood there, one on each end of a step of the 6 steps. Nothing like it was ever made for any kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. Silver was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon, for the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish used to come bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put into his mind. Every one of them brought him presents, articles of silver and of gold, garments, myrrh, spices, horses, and mules, so much year by year. And Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, who he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. And he ruled over all the kingdom from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines. And horses were imported for Solomon from Egypt and from all lands. Can you imagine, you think about the stones that you see around, can you imagine if that was just almost like waste? That was like silver, because gold was so much more important than the silver, and silver is just kind of commonplace. Just kind of gives you an idea of the wealth and everything they had. But then, right after that is when verses 29 through the end of the chapter. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, from first to last, are they not written in the history of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer concerning Jeroboam the son of Nebat? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over Israel 40 years, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. So that's, once he passed away, that's when, everything starts happening. But it doesn't really say anything about Jeroboam and where he was in relation, does it? Not in our text. But if we'll look at that, we'll see on page 38 where that first relationship came up. So it says in 1 Kings 11:4, additionally, certain individuals trouble the king. One of these individuals is named Jeroboam. When he was first introduced in Scripture, Jeroboam is called a mighty man of valor in 1 Kings 11:28. Because of his obvious ability, King Solomon made him the officer over all the labor force of the house of Joseph. So we can see now where Jeroboam came into play with Solomon. But Jeroboam's time as an officer in Solomon's government did not last. Word reached the king about a prophecy that Ahijah had made, declaring God's intention to take the kingdom out of Solomon's son's hand and give it to Jeroboam, the 10 tribes. Upon hearing that Jeroboam would be king over Israel, Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam rose and fled to Egypt, to Shishkashak, the king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. Of course, again, in the text that we read in 2 Chronicles 10, that's where we saw that when Rehoboam was made king, that Jeroboam found out about it. He came back from Egypt to bring the people and everything to talk to him. And then, so at that point, Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place. And it says, although Rehoboam's ascension to the throne of Israel was not initially disputed, the people led by Jeroboam questioned whether the future king would continue to place a heavy burden on the nation as his father Solomon had done. So obviously, Solomon he gained a lot of wealth. How did he get it? A lot of it was taxing, wasn't it? People brought him stuff, but he also was taxing the people very heavily. And that's what brought the whole question up, the decision that we're talking about right now of what are we going to do? When the people came and said, if you'll be kind to us, if you'll lighten our load, lighten our burden, lighten our taxes, we'll serve you. Sounds like a pretty easy answer, doesn't it? Okay, fine. But, I don't know if he wasn't really crazy about that or what, because, he's got his contemporaries that he wanted to talk to about that as well. All right, so at the bottom of page 38, right before the wise advice, this declaration prompted the people from the 10 of Israel's tribe to revolt because of the decision that was going to be made. And then consequently, the kingdom divided. Jeroboam was made king over Israel, and Rehoboam reigned over Judah. So that's kind of what we see. So now we're going to go back and we're going to look at the advice. We're going to look at both the wise advice and the foolish advice. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we get into that? Okay. All right, so on the wise advice, unlike his grandfather David, whose kingship was initially challenged by Saul's son Ishbosheth, and unlike his father Solomon, who had to overcome Adonijah's attempt to make himself king, Rehoboam arrived at his coronation without a challenger. For all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. And the choice of Shechem as the location of Rehoboam's coronation is interesting. Of course, again, this is where the book, like typical, gets into the question of could this happen? Does this might happen? But it had been both a place of worship for Abraham and Jacob, and it's where the Israelite forefathers were buried, and the place where Joshua renewed the covenant with the nation. Nothing in the text indicates whether Shechem was selected because of its historical significance, although this is certainly possible. It does reveal that the people, led by Jeroboam, questioned Rehoboam about his plans for taxing the nation. Would he continue the heavy taxation imposed by his father, or would he lighten their load? If he chose the latter course of action, the people promised, "We will serve you." And readers should not miss the threat of rebellion if he chose otherwise. Rehoboam wisely asked the Israelites to allow him 3 days to consider the matter. And during this time, he consulted with the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived. And in response to his request for advice, the older man answered, "If you are kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever." From the perspective of the elders, Rehoboam's path to peace demanded conciliation on his part. They seemed to recognize that he only had a tenuous hold on the throne. And then I was thinking about it. That's a word that we don't use a whole lot today, isn't it? A couple of those, conciliation. We talk about reconciliation in a little bit. But so I looked at the definition of conciliation, and it's the process of getting two or more people or groups to end a disagreement and to make peace. It often involves bringing in a neutral third party to help with both sides talk through their issues and reach a compromise without having to go to court, which is kind of what we talk about today. But the goal is to find a peaceful middle ground that both sides are happy with instead of fighting it out. And then sometimes we'll have a third party, an unbiased expert, listen to both sides and actively suggest possible solutions, kind of like a mediator. And then the result, the third party suggestions are not legally binding, but both sides have to willingly to agree to the solution. And then they said that he had a tenuous hold. I was like, well, what's tenuous? If something is tenuous, it's thin, either literally or metaphorically. If you try to learn a complicated mathematical concept by cramming for 45 minutes, you'll have a tenuous grasp of that concept at best. And so it's lacking substance. So the wise men already knew that he was basically hanging on by a thread, right? And if he made a bad decision, he's history. What's the fact? No, I'm going to make it harder on you. Well, we're going to rebel against that. And if that was just like that thin type of hold on the throne. And then going back to the conciliation part, he'd have to compromise, wouldn't he? He'd have to give in a little bit. He'd have to, those taxes that his dad had done, he's got to lessen those. Well, what if I don't get as much money as what I'm used to getting? It's going to be hard to live on what we've already got, if we can't bring in more or something. And, he had that decision to make that, maybe I don't need to. So there was the wise advice. All right, any thoughts on that?
He needed to be at least as good as our politicians in our time promised that he'd go.
Whether they did or not. But and that goes back to the whole thing. If you do this and do this and do this, and obviously he's like, I don't want to give.
There's a powder keg sitting there, right? It's a very tenuous
Right.
situation.
And do you think he was really aware of how like you said, the powder keg, how close it was to exploding? I don't think. I think he's kind of oblivious, wasn't he?
If he wasn't very smart.
Exactly. Yep. I think sometimes the power kind of gets your head and things like that, and then what does he do next? He seeks advice from other people. He didn't really care for the advice of the wise men, the ones that had been around with Solomon, that gave him this advice: if you do this, and well, what if I don't want to do this? What if I want to do something different? So on 39, at the very bottom, the foolish advice. Not content to follow the advice of the elders, Rehoboam turned to his contemporaries for counsel. He asked, "What advice do you give? How should we answer the people who have spoken to me, saying, 'Lighten the load which your father gave to us, put on us'?" And unlike the older men who encouraged a moderate course, younger men urged the king to be even more severe. And they advised him to reply, "My little finger should be thicker than my father's waist." Some of them say thigh, depending on which version. And whereas he has put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scourges, or English Standard says scorpions. You think you had it bad before? This is what you need to do, Rehoboam. You need to make it harder. You need to, rule with that iron fist. You need whatever your father did, you need to be a bigger man. You need to be stronger. You need to be, tougher on these people. That's what you need to do. And, I think that may have got to his head too. Yeah, his power hungry. I'm in a position, I can do this. I can be, ruthless and everything. So the response, obviously, their advice was vastly different from the elders. The difference between the two pieces of advice was the difference between a leader guided by wisdom or by selfishness. That kind of shows that selfishness, going back to the taxation of, well, I've got plenty, I want more. And then Rehoboam showed prudence by seeking advice before answering the people. He asked for 3 days and said, perhaps who remembered his father's words, where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. It should be noted, however, that the wise counsel, if it is to be profitable, must be heeded. Herein was Rehoboam's mistake. Rather than listen to the counsel of the older men who advised him to speak good words to the people, the king was influenced by the young men who encouraged him to rule with even more strictly than his father. And there's where we see, the decisions have been made, hasn't it? When he heard both sides, I can be, kind of middle of the road, lighten it, be nice to them, or I can be ruthless. He made the decision, I want to be ruthless. And then, the next section we'll see Israel's rebellion. So after the 3 days had passed, Jeroboam and the people gathered to hear the king's answer. And instead of addressing the people with the kindness as the elders had encouraged, and obviously what the people wanted to hear, the king answered them roughly. Making his intentions clear, he declared, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges." The obvious meaning of Rehoboam's abrupt reply is that his reign would be harsh. And given that the people had promised to serve him if he would lighten the load, it's a little wonder that his decree prompted the people to rebel. Interestingly, the text reveals that the Lord's hand was at work in this division of the kingdom, for the turn of events was from God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he has spoken by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. The prophecy reference is recorded in 1 Kings 11, 29 through 39. Although Rehoboam acted freely, his actions were part of God's plan. So, we see that, that's in control of everything, God is. But he had a choice. He could have made that choice different, right? Okay, so then what happened after that? Upon hearing the king's reply, the people immediately recognized that he did not listen to them. It's pretty obvious. They're asking for, peace and lighter load, and he said, "No, I'm going to make it worse." So what do? What share should we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Evidently, the people felt the king would not listen to them. He would not provide for their needs. Having reached this conclusion, the people departed. So in one moment, Rehoboam destroyed a kingdom that had stood for 120 years. Now, obviously, it had some issues back and forth, but as a whole, it was there for 120 years. But Rehoboam did not allow the people to secede from his kingdom without an attempt to retain him. He sent Hadaram, who was in charge of revenue, but the children of Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. The kind of questions here, what was Rehoboam, what did he want to accomplish by sending him to the people? It's not stated in the text. There's speculation that was he sent to negotiate, was he dispatched to collect the taxes that he was going to impose, but whatever the reason, he was killed, and that act of violence spurred Rehoboam to flee to the safety of Jerusalem. So, you can tell right now he's already kind of, hey, I'm going to go ahead and get what I said I was going to do. I'm going to go get my taxes or whatever the case was. They kill him, and he goes, uh-oh. Now he realized that I have opened up a can of worms. And this is, how do you put the genie back in the bottle, type thing. At that point, then he's fearing for his own safety, so he's fleeing to Jerusalem. And at this point, the text solemnly announces the permanence of the vision. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. From one united kingdom arose two nations, Israel and Judah, and nothing would ever be the same again. Right. Any other thoughts or anything as we get into our little applications?
If Abiram had any reading on the situation ahead, he might as well have headed off in another direction.
Yeah, exactly, because
Know he had death for him.
yeah,
And,
true.
up there,
Up there, right.
northern.
Mm-hmm. All right. So look at our applications. No matter what situation we face, we would do well to seek wise counsel from others. There is special value to be gained from listening to the advice of those who have weathered the storms of life, for experience is sometimes the best teacher. Rehoboam's mistake was in listening to those who had no more practical experience than he possessed. We must also recognize that the wise counsel is useless if one is not willing to follow it. You know, what good is all the good advice in the world if you don't heed that advice? You know, you're going to be right in the same situation. All right, the second point, the rapid division of the kingdom following Rehoboam's response to the people should cause us to think carefully about how our actions affect others. Just as trust takes a lifetime to build and a moment to break, so it is with one's reputation, the unity of a congregation, and a number of other matters. It is lamentable that one can work for years to build up a cause, only to have his work destroyed by someone whose cavalier actions occur without a second thought. We would do well to remember that even truth can be spoken in an appropriate manner. I've had it said before, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And we need to think about that also. And then the third point, the role God played in the events recorded in 2 Chronicles simply cannot be dismissed. This does not mean Rehoboam is any less responsible for his actions. We have no reason to think he acted in any other way than how he desired to act. Nevertheless, the division of the kingdom had been prophesied. Scripture consistently upholds both God's sovereignty and man's free will. In this instance, it seems God used Rehoboam, who was a willing participant, to produce the results he desired. So, this, like I say, this is kind of a fairly short lesson right here, but a lot of impact on it, isn't it? I mean, think about how things have changed with that region from then until now, even. You know, you see all sorts of problems that are happening, currently even because of this. All right. Any other thoughts before we get to the questions?
You know, the difference between the older advisors and the younger ones here just gives rise to the thought. I mean, and the proverbs don't speak of the benefit of age as far as wisdom and so on. I mean, but they're exceptions to everything. I mean, I've known old men without wisdom, and I've known young men with good judgment and patience and so on. I know some
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, because he seeked the advice of them first, but he rejected it probably before they even started talking, didn't he? I mean, he already said, "All right, I'm going to do it just because I know I'm supposed to." But then he's like, in the back of his mind, he's already thinking, well, if they don't give me the answer I want right here, I know some people that will. My buddies over here, yeah. And I'm sure a lot of them were like, hey, if we support you on this, hey, have my pockets too, give me some of this and all. But yeah, for sure, I think he was wanting to confirm what he already wanted to do. All right, so we got a few more minutes. We'll go through the questions right quick. These are pretty straightforward if anybody hadn't been asleep during the last few minutes. But anyways, number one, where did Rehoboam go to be proclaimed king? Shechem. Mm-hmm. And then where did Jeroboam flee when hiding from Solomon? Egypt. And what did the people ask Rehoboam to do? Lighten our load. Exactly. And they went on from there too. If you lighten our load, then we will do this. We will always serve you, etc. So how many days did Rehoboam take to consider the request? 3 days. And how did the older men advise Rehoboam to treat the people? Yep. Exactly. Yep. Give them a break. Exactly. And then on the flip side, like I said, the other 180-degree difference, how did the younger men advise Rehoboam to treat the people? Be harsh, exactly. You think you had it bad before? Get ready, because you're getting ready to have it even worse. Just hang on. And we've always been over this, but whose advice did Rehoboam follow? The younger men, his contemporaries. Yep. And then who predicted the division of the kingdom? Well, but who was the prophet? Ahijah the Shulamite. And then who did Rehoboam reign over? The southern, the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. Right. And then where did Rehoboam go after the people stoned Hadram? He got out of Dodge, didn't he? He did. He went to Jerusalem. That's right. So, yep. So, all right. Any other thoughts or comments as we conclude? All right. Well, thank you very much for their attention, and we'll have our worship here shortly.